Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore.
Hey, and welcome to Boggy Talk. We hope you're doing well after a week off.
You missed us.
You have missed us so much.
So much.
Yes, you're nice and rested from spring break. And
do you think people just like listen to old Boggy Talks?
I think they missed us so much they go back. We should have released a Boggy Talk's greatest hits.
Oh, we need to do that.
Compilation. It might be a really short episode.
Best
I don't know.
of Boggy Talk.
That's right. But
it'll be the other people we had talking, like all of our guests.
Definitely the ones where we had the guest for sure.
Yeah.
You doing okay today?
Yeah. I feel rested and feel ready to go.
Yes, ready to go. I know it's like yes, and you come back from like a week off or time off from spring break. You're saying this a week, but time off, and then you're like, oh man, it's Easter. It's time to get ready, get the ball rolling.
I feel like in ministry, which for us is just all crazy right now because we're kind of understaffed and all that, and church has been growing. But January's wild.
Yeah.
And then February, March is like
a little bit of the doldrums.
Yeah.
You kind of get in a rhythm.
And then you take the break, and then April, May, just the rhythms of ministry, Easter, school. It's good. 100%. Summer's different.
It's
weird. A different busy.
Summer is weird busy.
Yeah. So I think like internal wise, there's less, but there's just like you'll go on a mission trip. I go on a mission trip late summer. We have camps, all that stuff.
Camps, kids clubs, and then just exactly.
And then the fall is just insane.
It comes back. It's like January.
It builds in the fall.
It does. And it builds to
And
Christmas.
then December's different, busy.
December's a craziness. So here we are in the middle of March.
You care.
That's right. Thanks for listening. We just kind of debriefed.
Yes, we did. Anyway, so my point was that it's about to get crunk.
It's about to get
all right,
crunk. Mary J. Blige.
Ooh, look at that.
Get our crunk up on. All right. So we should have that as like probably copyright
our new theme song.
That's right.
What is our theme song from?
It is a track off of a website called Soundstripe that we use for video backing tracks. So it's just an instrumental track. I thought sounded upbeat yet boggy.
I can't think of
it's kind of like
anything.
Country-ish, like boggy-ish. I listened for a while to find the right vibe for the.
Did you really?
I did. Yeah.
By a while, you mean 3 minutes?
3 seconds. No, just kidding. I just was read through. I was like, let's listen to a bunch, I settled on that one because I felt like it was like the right vibe.
Listen, we need to do an episode on behind this Boggy Talk.
Yeah,
behind the bog.
Just like all the aesthetics that you just kind of like, oh, that feels
like, how did we choose the voice of Boggy Talk?
That's right.
All that.
Now, that's a funny story because I was like, oh, we should have an intro. And Jordan Renna, who provides the intro voice, was on worship team that time. And I literally had that idea about 10 minutes before worship team. And I said, Jordan, come here, record this really quick. And then she did because she's a pro and
she has a great speaking voice.
She does have a great speaking voice. She's a teacher, so she's a great presenter, all those things. So yeah. Steve Wren, our administrator, he married well. She's a rock star. So
since we're on this, I remember how Boggy Talk started is it was actually like COVID still.
Yeah.
And we were only having Sunday mornings.
Yes. And so we were like, hey, we just brainstorm ideas, ways to still connect with people and talk about stuff and get people an avenue to connect. And it's just continued due to high demand, of course.
Part of it was that, again, going through books of the Bible, remember we were like, hey, there's some cultural issues we don't necessarily get to hit that probably should be hit. And so here's the avenue to do that. We actually plugged that at Discovery.
Right. Because somebody asked that question about, do you guys talk about these specific issues? We're like, yes, with the text addresses on Sunday mornings and on Boggy Talk. We talk about this stuff. So
little did you know that you were going to get the history of Boggy Talk.
Oh, well,
the rich history.
The rich. I mean, the now 3.5 year 3-year history, not 3.5.
It'll be 3 years this
that's right.
August, right?
That's right.
Or this July or something.
Well, I don't know. When was that?
Started 2020.
It was in the summer. That's right. Yeah. There you go. So, we'll have to have a
It was so long ago, we don't even remember.
That's right. Oh man.
3-year anniversary.
That does feel like a long time ago.
It does. Still no sponsors.
No sponsors. So if you want to do something about that, you can be the first. You can be
Sponsored
the first.
by Church on Bayshore.
Hey, well, let's dive into what we're talking about today. We got a topic. We got some questions. We had some good questions today.
Yes, we do.
And then we got a little
Normally
game.
They're bad.
Normally you guys give some really bad questions, but today, a few of you reached out with some good ones. So what we're talking about today is the topic is the value of kids and student ministry. And specifically, we're going to talk about this as not just as pastors, but also as dads,
as papas,
as papa, who have kids in both kids and student ministry, and why we think it's important. Because if you don't know this or not, there are some churches who are I wouldn't say they're not for this. There's some churches who are so far as they're against student ministry and kids ministry that we are
integrated
totally all together,
only.
integrated worship, and that's it. That's all we do.
And some churches only want old people going there.
Yeah.
They wouldn't say that, but they do.
They act that way.
Yeah.
And then there's some churches who I think would be more extreme in student ministry than we are, and that everything is compartmentalized. Like even the Sunday morning worship gathering, they have a separate one for students, a separate one. And
they're going to hell.
No,
I'm just
terrible.
kidding. I'm just kidding.
And then there's, what we have is kind of a hybrid model where we do place emphasis on the discipleship of these groups.
Yeah.
We do have a corporate worship service where students are definitely there. Kids are welcome. We also have a kids worship environment because we do think that that's important to offer that for kids to learn on their level. And there's the debate about what is caught versus what is taught. And so as not as a pastor,
as a
daddy, as a papa, why would you say you are for, or you appreciate or are thankful for kids in student ministry?
Yeah, I think that primarily, I just need a break from
That's
my
right.
kids.
I would say get a break. You're like, please fix this.
No, when we have preschoolers, that might have been true, but like as our kids are older, like we actually feel like we don't get enough time with our kids. So that's not really the motivation. I would say that I think that it is great to have other voices speaking into your child's life. And I don't think there's a right and wrong reason to do this. However, we have found that typically most communities aren't actually that communal. And so, we don't have people over in our house all the time, and we're not we're not getting home at 5:00 and all sitting on the driveway. Like that's just not life. And so, and specifically, not that communal with other believers. And more so, actually, now that our kids are older and they're in activities. So to me, it creates an opportunity for there to be another voice or voices in our child's life, reinforcing the things that we're teaching. That's me as a Christian dad, I would say. Before I move on to like the kingdom perspective as a Christian believer, what would you say as a dad?
I echo that 100%. I think it is great, especially as our kids get older, in the middle school and high school years. I think, and as a parent, we have multiple kids in our house, and so and it's just like, because of my personality, because of their personalities, like with certain kids, I can easily connect on some things and I can't. That doesn't change the fact that like the truth that I'm driving all of them to. But honestly, there is appropriate times, I think, developmentally that my kids are like, they're going to hear something from me, but they're going to listen to the same thing from someone else just because that's what we do. And for them to hear things not reinforced, to hear things reinforced, but also for them to have someone to go to talk to that they respect, that can show them the heart of God, maybe even in ways that I can't because I'm one person and I can't represent God fully. The body of Christ is a picture of, it's just, I really appreciate that. I think I think back to my own experience growing up in a youth ministry that was, significantly smaller than our student ministry, but there were adults who were my friends' parents who were leading our classes. And for me, that was a form, I think, even of accountability as a student. Like I knew that they were watching and, in the community but also just encourage. I mean, these are the people that I invited to my high school graduation who, prayed for me while I was in college, who when I went into ministry prayed over me, who still will send a note or, a little comment on Facebook. It's just it's the foundation of community that's being laid for our kids in this is beautiful. And I don't think it can be undersold. Or oversold, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that, we want to create, when I say positive experiences, I don't mean like entertainment. I mean like this just positive feeling that children have from people who hold firm to the word, but then love them. And I think, we're all just trying to create that. And I would say that in our culture that is more entertainment focused and is more secular, like this is needed even more.
Yeah.
That we would press in. And unfortunately, I think our church and comparatively, our church is doing well, but most churches find people actually disengaging more from children's ministry than they did when we were young. And so, I would really challenge all of our parents in our church, but any church, you should be involved in children's and student ministry specifically depending on where your kids are in some way. As I think about the people in our church, the Nelsons, the Barretts, the Waits, I mean, just people who I'm like, I hope our children are where their children are, and I hope we have the relationship they have with their children. They were in,
Yeah.
and their kids, some of them great athletes. I mean, they did some sports, but they weren't gone regularly. They were, I think that's something that I think it needs to be like important is, I know, like, even in our church, there are parents who make it a priority to get their children to big student events and experiences, but don't make regular worship a priority. And I just think you're really dishonoring what the Lord's called you to do there. I'm not telling you where the line is. I'm not saying 4 Sundays, 8 Sundays. I'm not saying, I think 6. If you're missing 1 out of 4 times the whole year, like that's a lot. I'm just saying. And I think the average churchgoer attends church 1.4 times a year now, a month. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just think we are not in this when that's a true statistic of our parenting. And so we just made it a priority. Like, we want our children in regular worship as the scriptures tell us. And we think others should be pressing in there. I do think in addition to that, this isn't as a pastor, as a dad who's a believer, also, like, other children are coming in who aren't being discipled by their parents. And by engaging and ultimately engaging with the parents, we're building the kingdom and changing the course of families. And
Absolutely.
I think that's important.
Yeah, when this isn't modeled at home, when maybe a parent at home is nominally would say they're a Christian, but it's nominal at best, and they're not pursuing this at home. Our students, our kids experiencing that and seeing another guy, another man, another woman who are just passionate about the Lord, and it's not just a Sunday morning passion, but they are intentional, that it can be life-changing for them. I mean, it really can. And I think, it can really change the trajectory of their own lives and their family. And I think, going back to what you were just talking about, Paul Purvis said this at a parenting conference, and I've heard it said before that, we should not be surprised if our kids end up marginalizing the things that we don't prioritize. Like, we can't expect kids to prioritize what we marginalize.
Right.
And so don't be surprised one day if our kids don't prioritize the Lord, the church, if we treat it as optional, or as we'll get to that one day when all the more important stuff is done. And again, like you said, it's not a legalistic thing of be here X times or you can only miss. But honestly, we do have to say, what is priority? And priorities will mean other things will sacrifice. I mean, it just is that way.
Yeah, I just think, and again, I'm not getting this, but if you're like, okay, Jesus said, the scriptures say, don't forsake the assembling of ourselves. You're like, okay, we hear that. But what did the travel coach say?
Yeah.
Like, who are our children seeing is the Lord there? And again, I'm not saying that doesn't mean, your children don't miss some because they're involved in sports and it's something they're passionate about. Like, we're not going there. So, like, if you're defensive about this, I really do feel like you're probably, where you're not, where you shouldn't be. And there's other things too. But what does the weather say, right? Like, what does, the boat say? Like, and again, that doesn't mean from time to time. But when people say, like, well, I worship the Lord more when I'm out on the boat or whatever, like, I don't understand that. Like, I'm not saying that we don't worship when we're doing those things, but, like, this is something the Bible says. Like, I'm not telling you this. Honestly,
I want you here to listen to me. Yeah.
It's honestly, as a pastor, if you're here less and still tithe, you're actually helping the church functionally better. Like, so I'm actually saying this out of unselfish reasons, right? I'm saying this for you. And then again, like, I'll just give you an example. Like, I truly believe that this would happen if I wasn't the pastor too. I was serving kids ministry the other night, and there's a kid, comes from a broken home. And his caregiver is trying to do her best, just gotten back in church. I met her through coaching. And here I am kind of praying for her and talking to her about what she's going through. And she's helping me know that. So I know where her son is. And I'm like, this is beautiful. Like, this is children's ministry, and I'm ministering to both of them. And while I'm doing that, because there's adequate number of volunteers, I kind of like stepped outside the room and talked to her for a few minutes, which I wouldn't be able to do if we were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we all approach it with that mentality, it really is this great opportunity. I'm using children's ministry, but student ministry there's so much like opportunity to speak into the lives of the students at that point.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back about volunteering and serving. Let's kind of turn the corner there, but like serving it with students and kids and working with them is not burden, it's opportunity.
Right.
And I think people treat it like as something I have to do. That they keep asking me to do this. Man, this is an opportunity to disciple people.
Yeah.
You know, the priority of every generation is the next generation. It's one of our values. And we want to take advantage of this opportunity, you know, not this burden that we have to do this, but we get to do this. This is an opportunity to invest, to pour in the truth. And, you know, even if I would say even people who talking about working specifically, serving in kids ministry or in student ministry, if you feel like you're not great with kids, you know, I would say like there's things you can be coached in and taught, but honestly, like kids just want you there and it's good. Like you don't have to be the Pied Piper. You don't have to be the person who can get up and do crazy dances. There may be the one kid in the back who needs to, I am.
You are.
You know, but there may be that one kid who just needs you to sit with them in the back, and that's needed just as much as the person who's corralling the 50 up front. And that's the same in student ministry. I think there's just such incredible opportunity. And so I would just encourage you, if you got to be here to serve, but I would just say it is unselfish to serve. Like it just be unselfish. And there's, you know, somebody who's serving now. She said, you know, I didn't love serving in kids ministry before I started serving in kids ministry. But then when I started serving, I was like, man, I actually love this. Like it's so rewarding to do it. So
I agree.
I would just say, do it, y'all.
That's most things. And to the younger audience who are looking for these Instagram moments and anything that we're doing, quantity time leads to quality time. And so when it comes to parenting, like those quality moments, you know, they come from, everybody says it's quality over quantity, it's quality over quantity. Yeah. But quality comes because of quantity time. Yeah. And so, you know, in parenting, spend more time with your kids, you're eventually going to have those quality moments. In serving, spend more time serving, you're eventually going to have those moments. And I do think that's something that a lot of the older generation example for us well is just the longevity of serving and faithfulness. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you said it, it's an opportunity. Yeah. And what are we going to do? You know, I specifically challenge our church, you know, the reason we constantly have a push for children's ministry is we keep growing. And we're at one of those places again in the life of our church where we're going to need more volunteers, you know, or we're not going to be able to grow. And it's not all about growing in numbers, but if God is bringing them here, we want to be ready. And so, you know, I would just encourage you, and most of the people who listen to Boggy Talk are probably dialed in. Yeah. But if you're not serving our church in some capacity or your church in some capacity, please do.
Just do it. You know, and I think bringing full circle, like we specifically have some friends who are very pro, you know, family integrated church. Yeah. You know, we want our kids with us in service and that's all we want. And I'm like, that's great. But going back to our series in Galatians, you know, like that's not necessarily the gospel. And if you feel that way or feel like, no, you don't have, I would never go to that church because they don't have kids ministry. Like I understand, but also that's not right. And I think, you know, we say this all the time. Parents are or should be or called to be the primary disciplers of their kids. But we are woefully insufficient on our own. Right. And that is why we need each other. That's why we need community. And I think a great reason why we should prioritize kids in student ministry, not because there is a perk. Like when we go to Life Group, like it's easier to focus because we don't have small children running around. Yeah. And you know, and adults can actually share a little more openly because there's not a 13-year-old in the room listening who may not be mature enough to handle listening to a real situation.
There's still a 30 or 40-year-old in that case, but you know.
Very true.
Or 50 or 60.
But you know, and as a parent, you know, I'm talking to my kids about those things, you know, at home, but I think it's just a great opportunity. I think another reason why we do it. So anything else you add to that?
Nah, that's good.
Right. Hey, that's good. Well, hey, let's dive into some questions. Question number 1 is, what do you think of the Jesus Revolution movie? And I would say, I think so much of it that I have not seen it yet.
I know. So we knew this question was coming, and neither one of us went and saw it yet. I don't have time.
Movies,
I know.
When it comes out, when it's streaming.
I actually told Christy that I wanted to see it, and 3 of our kids were gone for a weekend, and she's like, well, go see it. I had a deacon's training, and I went to, and she's like, go see it after the deacon's training. I'm like, at 10:30 at night? I was like, first of all,
the Christians stay up that late when they can be playing it with
I'm
Christians.
I'm going to fall asleep. It was playing at 10:30.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm going to fall asleep during it. And secondly, I'm going to walk in the movies by myself at 10:30 at night. Like, going to the movies by myself actually sounds like awesome.
Yeah.
Just the quiet. Like,
yeah, you're like,
but not
you will
at
fall
10:30 at night. Oh,
dark.
I would fall asleep.
Sure.
No question.
So I can't say anything for the movie itself. I've heard people who've seen it who really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I did see an interview with Kelsey Grammer, the actor who plays one of the main characters, talking about his experience playing it, that it was the most meaningful acting role he's ever taken, how he would just weep.
Even more than Frasier?
I know, more than Frasier, more than Cheers. I mean, but
Frasier was on Cheers.
That's
he
true.
Was
Frasier. He was, that's right. But he was talking about, like, it was just the most meaningful experience he's ever had. And he would just, weep, at times. But so it was encouraging. Beyond that, I think it's an attempt to represent something, this movie that did happen.
Yeah, and it's a movie.
Yeah.
So it's going to be
dramatized. And it's not going to represent the full picture.
Yeah.
And, so honestly, that's all I can say about it. I mean, it's.
Yeah. And I mean, looking back on the Jesus movement, like I feel like this is a thread we hit every time. Like some of those characters, even in that movie, like, ended up doing some questionable things.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the midst of maybe some bad motives, maybe just immature ways, God still did work. I think there's some from any movement of God, there are things to be gleaned and there are things to not do again. And so, and again, in any movie is not the gospel. I do think we have to be careful, that we're inspired by something, like even The Chosen, I'm not, some people are very anti The Chosen. I really don't watch it.
You should.
So we're a little different. It's hard for me. I do think they take too much liberty with the text. And I do think, I do think we have to be cautious.
And you watch it guarded, but
and again, I hear the critiques of like, hey, maybe this is very wrong, the liberty they're taking with it. I'm not fully there, but I would say, we have to be aware. This is not a movie. This is not the Bible. They are taking and expounding upon it. Just kind of like when I get to the application point of a sermon, like, what hey, this is James talking about how it might apply, and there might be some James in here that I don't agree with, and that's okay. It's but what the word says is clear. And
like, it's just like, it's a movie like this, just like the TV, just like the series Chosen. It's a tool, and there's limitations to the tool.
Well, depending on who you are, you might mean different things by calling it a tool. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like we've watched Chosen, we've enjoyed it. We've talked about our kids. Hey, this wasn't in the Bible. This part is what they're trying to do. You got to know
the Bible to do
but
that,
you're absolutely right. And you can't say that, but you do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's been helpful in some ways for them to visualize some things and understand, like, even just culturally what things were like. So I think, and it just, you watch that and you're like, I just love Jesus,
Yeah.
But at least that's how I feel. But anyway, it's a movie. So watch it and, filter it through those lenses, I guess.
Yeah.
Next question is, what do you think Paul would think?
By the way, I have like 100 other thoughts on that, but we're just going to move on. So
we could do a series on
because the question wasn't about The Chosen. It was about Jesus Revolution.
Which we haven't seen. So end of question.
And we're probably not going to see anytime soon, or we would have.
It's got to be streaming and probably for free for me to watch it. So the next question is, what do you think Paul would think walking into the American church and its services? I think that would vary widely depending upon which service he walked into.
He would like me right now because I'm reading his letters every Sunday morning. Because we're going through Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians.
He'd be like, that's not what I meant. No, I was kidding. That's pretty good. Yeah. I think that in some of the things that Paul would affirm that is happening in some American churches is that he would affirm a devotion to the word, the exaltation of Jesus, the supremacy of Christ. He would, in churches where we're practicing the things that he writes, this is great. In places that are passionate in worship and in their practice of worship and serving and evangelizing, he would say, great. In other churches, he'd walk in and be like, hey guys, have you ever heard of 1 Corinthians 13, orderly worship? There's some things happening here that don't really fall in line with with orderly worship. I think he would wonder a lot of things about why we do the form that we do. I think he'd probably have a lot to say.
Yeah, he'd probably be like, "Why is there cold air blowing in this building?"
No, it's so chilly here.
I think those are like, what would Jesus think? What would Paul think? Those are great questions to start a conversation. However, I think if we clearly knew, and there are things you can't clearly know, but like this person's asking more about style, the buildings, all that. Like, I think we don't know. And I think we're wrestling through that. Right. And I think there's a tension there because, the goal of the Christian and specifically the Bible teacher is to bridge the gap between the culture of the New Testament, if we're talking about Paul's letters, and today's culture. And so, it's not as black and white, as, well, Paul said this, and it's like, yeah, but okay, but what did he mean by that? And how does that apply today? I think it is the challenge of the church. And I think ultimately, like, God knows if our heart is aiming to honor him. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I mean, he would write about our materialism. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And we're guilty of that too. I mean, you have a app I watch, and I mean, what is that? I'm just kidding. I forgot my announcement. I just figured
Black
today.
Friday, and it's a series 3.
I know. I'm just teasing.
But isn't it funny how like we have to justify how little we paid for anyway, that's a different Boggy talk too.
That is a different Boggy talk. But yeah, so I think. But clear immorality. I mean, clear different preaching of other gospels.
I mean, I honestly think he would just say a lot of the things that he said in his letters in Scripture, but contextualized for the Western church. I mean, that's what Paul is doing, as he's bridging the gospel to the letters he's writing to the churches and addressing the cultural issues that are happening, and he's placing, correcting things. And I think, he would point out ways that we are, just like we've been in the book of Galatians, where we are running back we're running away from freedom and to slavery again, just like he's saying in chapter 5. I think he would point out the immorality. He would definitely point out the materialism, and he would, tell us, to leverage it all for the kingdom, just like he did throughout the books of Scripture that he wrote.
I do think he would say, hey, if you're not sharing the gospel, then what's the point of you still being on this earth? I do think he would say that.
Probably really bluntly too.
That was pretty blunt. I do think, like, honestly, I mean, Paul very clearly articulated, like, the only reason, like, to live is Christ and to die is gain. And so he would rather be in heaven with Jesus, but he thinks God left him here on the account of, us, those who he was writing to at that point. And so, like, Paul would not be okay with you just thinking like your goal is to live a good life, retire, collect seashells, make sure your kids are set up for college. Like, he would say, why are you not living on mission? Right. And so, I guess, so this kind of getting to me, like, that's the big, like, bother for me as a Christian is like, and pastor is like, how come so few Christians are trying to help others see how great Jesus is? Like, I mean, someone even said to me the other day, they're like, well, I just, I don't preach the gospel using words. Mine's more the way I live. And I said, man, I think that is not in line with the Scripture. We could talk about that more over coffee if you want. And like, I just think a lot of people are just trying to live a good life. And Romans 10 says people are saved by hearing the gospel.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something that's very clear to me.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question because it helps us evaluate where we are and what we're actually doing. And are we addressing the things that the Bible addresses? So,
not saying I'm the perfect example of that.
We're not, but
I'm constantly convicted that the busyness of being a pastor gets in the way of me being personally evangelistic.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. Well, I think, I don't think anything else to add to that. Paul would be blunt and probably say a lot of things.
He would be blunt.
All right. Last question is this. We shared at Town Hall the ways that the missions and community outreach teams have decided to spend missions overage, but then also part of our regular budget is missions and missions giving and organizations, partners, missions organizations we're supporting. Question is, how are those decisions made?
I asked that question.
Like, how were those decisions made? So,
how did you guys come up with this stuff?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So specifically for missions and community outreach, we have ministry leadership teams that are all lay people, and then I specifically serve as the pastoral liaison on those teams. Those ministry leadership teams,
lay people means they're not paid.
They're not paid. They are volunteers. They are church members who are in the community, members of this church.
Yeah.
They all are vetted, which means they all are, people who are making disciples. They exemplify character, Christ-like character. They are active in the church. They're serving. They're giving. They're reaching. They model, Christ-like life. Those teams really are charged with helping develop the direction of the budget. Of course, there's input given by church members and the pastoral staff, and I give input to those things, but ultimately they make those recommendations. So specifically, with our missions, like in community outreach, we have some missions and community outreach priorities. One is local and global church planting, missionary support, compassion ministries, serving the orphan widow, the poor, and the sojourner, and our local engagement. How are we equipping and building bridges into the community to share the gospel? How are we sharing our faith? So we try to fall under those priorities. The teams, we hear vet requests. There's an organization that requests assistance or help or partnership. Those teams vet them, meet with them, examine, their faith, the statement of faith. If they're like faith and we feel like we can cooperate them, well, great. We can support. If not, that's okay. Like, God bless you. That's really the rundown as far as those ministry leadership teams do have ministry teams that function under them. So there is a church planting team. That team is, again, church members who, when we have churches that we could support as a church plant. Those leaders or pastors, come to us either through local connections or through organizations like the Send Network with the North American Mission Board. They're vetted. There's a process. We don't just give out the money, but there's a process, and there's there's also expectations of things they should do or reports they should give. We want to be sure that we're being wise stewards. Same with our missionaries. That we have a missionary agreement with the missionaries that we send or support. That we are providing these funds, and here's what you can expect from us in terms of support, but also here's what we expect from you. We expect regular communication. We want to hear how you're doing, those kinds of things. And in the community, we learn of needs and we see if we can meet them. Specifically with the overage, we contacted our missions partners, missionaries, organizations in the community and said, hey, what above and beyond needs do you have? God's provided above and beyond for our church. How can we help above and beyond? And we prayed through those needs that we did receive feedback from and just said, hey, what can we reach? What can we do? So, and ultimately, those recommendations were made by those MLTs. So there you go. That is it in a nutshell.
And then they submit that to my list to me, and I said, "Well, that's not my favorite, so we're not going to do that." No, I'm just
Their
kidding.
logo isn't cool.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, you call pastors to influence the direction of the church through preaching, teaching, leadership, relationship. But good pastors recognize that if there's not a council walking around them and most decisions, then the church isn't going to, if they can't lead 4 or 5 people to see that, then the church isn't going to be on board. And that council kind of helps with, and I mean, we call it ministry leadership teams or ministry teams, but kind of helps with like, hey, what is the body hearing? Not just what is the pastor hearing. But I mean, I think ultimately, like our desire is to hear from the Lord, realizing he speaks through the church. He speaks through other churches. He speaks through, just what's right in front of us, and a lot of it is what is right in front of us. And I think we're trying to not do too much,
right?
But to kind of focus more on a few things, which I'd still say we do a lot.
But we do. I mean, we focused in a lot more, recently. Yeah. I think that's a great point because we could if we just said yes to everything, we would be spread really thin. Right, but we were trying to make strategic impact where we're invested.
Yeah, but we're open.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean the ministry teams. Yeah. So anyway,
all right. If you have more questions about that, feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer.
Well, since you didn't come up with a game, Justin.
I slacked. It was my way for the game, and then James said, "Hey, what game are we doing?" I said, "I forgot."
So, and I just said how that's not my favorite. I think a game we play around the dinner table with my kids often is what's your favorite?
What's your favorite?
So here's the rules. you ask what's your favorite. The person has to answer. Then you have to answer. So you can't just ask me something like, "Who's your favorite person in the church?" Because you also would have to answer the question.
Yeah,
you understand?
All right, who's your favorite person in the church?
Christy Ross.
Oh, I was going to say Christy Wyatt.
Okay,
Right,
good one. Good one. What is your favorite book of the Bible to read?
Ooh, favorite book of the Bible to read? I would say Colossians.
Okay, why?
I love Colossians because it is just Jesus. I mean, well, the Bible is Jesus, but you know,
it is. I was going to correct you,
but I think one, because I remember like studying it at some point in college, and it really had a big impact on me.
Yeah.
And then just every time I go back to it, it's just a reminder of the supremacy of Christ in all things.
Yeah.
I love it. What about you?
Yeah, I would probably say Matthew, just because you're just hearing from Jesus. You know.
Oh, wait.
I mean, maybe Romans would be my second, just because it's such a just reminder of the gospel. But probably Matthew. If I had to take one book of the Bible with me on a deserted island, it'd be Matthew.
Yeah, if you ask me that next week, I may have a different answer. But today it's Colossians. I'm just trying to go with my gut because I don't want to overthink it.
Your turn.
Okay,
we'll both do 5, so that's one each.
Okay, goodness. All right. So your favorite. Oh, see, some of this I know, and I don't want to ask. Like your favorite sports team? Duh. I mean,
that's lame.
Yeah,
It's a lame question.
Can we do least favorite too? Is that okay? Is that acceptable?
Yeah. Since you didn't come up with an idea before.
Your least favorite church member. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
What's your, so this is probably different. Your favorite book to preach from?
That's a good one. That's a good one. It's hard for me not to say Galatians right now, just because it's been so fun. Right. And I haven't preached through all the books of the Bible. But man, it's got to be a gospel, just because
you're teaching the words of
you're
Jesus.
You're just walking with Jesus and learning from him and hearing. Man, it's not that country. Hearing from him.
Just
what about you?
Walking with him. You know, so I don't get to like teach through books of the Bible necessarily, like you know, on a Sunday morning in that context. But
you just usually do Andy Stanley studies and that stuff.
Right. I would say, so I'm going to like kind of expand this even just like leading like in discipleship or life groups. I really enjoyed going through the book of Mark. Like not just when we did Sunday mornings, but teaching through that.
So it's Matthew, but concise.
Basically, it's a shorter version. Mark is so like, and then we did this, and then it's just leave out all the details. It's kind of funny because I'm like
immediately he says that a lot. Immediately
right.
Okay. What would be, what's your favorite book? Like just book. If you were going to read this book several times throughout your life, what would it be?
Okay. So Christian book, like I have read this book and will plan to read this book again. Knowing God by J.I. Packer.
Okay.
That is just,
you may have said that before.
It's one of those books because like every time you read it, you're probably, you know, but both times that I've read it and I do plan to read it again. I mean, with space in between, you're just at new levels of understanding your relationship with God. And so it's just cool. I feel like it's just a very foundational, this is who God is book. I recommend it to a lot of people.
Yeah. If you saw a break in the film, it was because he said Velvet Elvis by Rob Bell. And then we cut that out.
And then my number 2 was Your Best Life Now.
Man, it's hard for me not to say Mere Christianity. But probably the book that like timing wise just like spoke to me the most is probably Crazy Love by Francis Chan.
Oh yeah. But
good. If I was going to take like one book and reread it over again, it'd be Mere Christianity, you know? So
yeah. Non-Christian book, or do you read non-Christian?
What is a non-Christian book?
I mean, fiction or even nonfiction books. So I would say the book that I read the fastest because I couldn't stop reading it was a book called
Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Those are good.
Yeah.
I'm not against Harry Potter like some people. I read the book Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson.
Yeah.
I read that in like a day and a half, and but I just couldn't stop reading.
Yeah.
He just is he just followed a lot of the just trials of he's a defender of, you know, specifically just trying to defend Black people in the judicial system, and a lot of the cases, the real life cases that happen, and some of the crazy things that happen actually geographically not very far from here. And the book itself is just very compelling to read.
You want to know what is a good fiction book? Actually, it's not good. Is Heaven is for Real? It's fiction. It's fiction.
It's compelling to read.
Yeah. No, I never read it. Actually, I did read some of it. I read some of 90 Minutes in Heaven, which again is trash. So sorry.
All right. So
somebody's like, wait, what? Yeah, that's no.
This one's going to be hard for me to answer favorite worship song?
Hymn or modern?
Newer. That's the next question is older. So you can't ask that next.
Like define new.
Like, modern era.
Like since my children have been born or before?
Yeah. Or since 2000. That's a wide era of modern era contemporary music.
Well, in Christ Alone, when was that?
Ooh, that's 2003.
Yeah, it's in Christ
some people are like, I love that hymn.
I know.
And I'm like, actually, it's written in
It's a modern
2003.
hymn, in Christ Alone.
Yes, hands down. That is my favorite.
Yeah.
I actually have, when I left the previous church, they actually did a really cool art piece within Christ Alone.
Oh, cool.
Framed it for. It was like my
That's
going away
nice.
present. It was really
That's
cool.
That's a good one. Yeah,
shout out to Cal Boone who made that for me.
Yeah. Favorite place to go on a vacation?
Well, that's hard because
It can be like generic.
don't get to go to.
Yeah, it can be general. Environment. Favorite environment.
Well, see, we live at the beach, and I love the beach, but it's not necessarily where I'd go for vacation now since we live there. If I didn't live here, I would say the beach. The mountains. I like the mountains. I do a lot. I like to hike when I'm in the mountains, not necessarily every day, but when I'm there, it's fun. I like the clean air, the hills. But I also love roller coasters, which are not usually in the mountains. So I would also be a theme
Alpine
park.
coasters.
Yeah. So
I've never been on one.
The only one,
the
only alpine coaster I've ever ridden was actually in China at the Great Wall of China. And I remember thinking, as I'm riding this alpine coaster, down from the Great Wall of China, I was like, first of all, this probably isn't really safe. Second of all, when the people who built the Great Wall of China did they envision this?
They were trying to keep Genghis Khan out, right?
They were not envisioning.
Now they can't even keep the white tourists out.
They were not envisioning tourists riding alpine coasters.
That's so funny. I would still say the beach. I mean, I wish it was less crowded.
Yeah,
but man,
I love the beach.
I can't afford it, but just to stay in a big house on the beach would be really awesome.
I do love the beach.
Just walk out on the beach.
We go as much as we can.
Yeah.
All right. So least favorite worship song.
Reckless Love.
Yeah. Why?
But it sounds good.
Yeah. It's catchy.
But maybe that's not accurate, but more like Jesus.
We just sang it.
I don't like that song. It's like, make me more like, I don't even know how you do that falsetto.
Like Jesus.
Yeah.
It's, so you
the world, when you go into the bridge part, I just I do not like that song.
That's so funny.
I don't mind.
Yeah, you don't mind. And when we do it, we don't do it as much now because we've done it, it's just kind of spaced out now. You're like, all right, cool. There's what's great is there's some older people in our church because we've sung that song in both services, contemporary and traditional.
Who love it.
And there's some older people who really do like that song. And so,
what about you?
Thank you.
What's your least favorite modern worship song?
Least favorite modern worship. I mean, this is kind of a broad, but any song that's has a long extended where you're supposed to sing.
I think
that.
there's one of those and more like Jesus, isn't there?
But it's just it's actually Lord, but it sounds it's they just ran out of lyrics, but this is a great melody, and so they're just singing. I'm like,
it's not very congregational.
I just want to sing words about Jesus.
So
I would that's a broad, but there, that's just kind of me.
I don't know how many we've asked.
I think that was 4.
Okay.
Maybe.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
we're just going to keep going.
All right.
This is the next hour of Boggy Talk. What's your favorite kid? No, I'm just kidding.
Your favorite.
What's your, that's in the bonus material.
That's right. We'll cut that.
It depends on the day, right?
Definitely.
What's your favorite preacher besides me?
Oh, favorite preacher?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's a great question because I feel like it's changed a lot. Like people that I enjoy listening to, man, I don't know now, honestly, because
you sit under my preaching
right,
every week and it all.
I would say there different ones for different reasons.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do really enjoy listening to David Platt because it's a lot. I mean, it's just scripture. I really enjoy listening to Tim Keller because I feel like in his preaching, I'm really challenged to think critically in ways that I probably wouldn't naturally have thought. I mean, after listening to him, I just really appreciate his real desire to if you listen to his teaching, it's like, this is the text. This is what it means. It's kind of how you teach too, but this is the text. This is what it means. and here's some practical application for your life and our culture. And I appreciate that because it's pretty straightforward. I used to like people who were like loud, I'm just not there. I can't take people who yell or who get like too aggressive because I think I have enough of that in my life. So yeah.
If I were to pick one, I guess I would say Alistair Begg.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it hasn't historically been that, but I really do think he's a good his accent makes him easy to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's just kind of a good blend of theology and real life situations, So
yeah.
Anyway.
All right. So someone says to you, hey, I'm about to bring you lunch or dinner. And they don't tell you where it's from, and it's here in Niceville. Where would you really hope it was from? It could be anywhere.
Yikes.
Now, so I know the book of James tells us not to show partiality, and as pastors, we shouldn't show partiality and endorse one restaurant over and over in a local community, but we got favorites. Where do you hope it's from?
That's a great question. I'm going to go outside of Niceville. I hope they drove to Domo.
Cafe Domo.
Because I can't do Niceville because we have like restaurant owners that come here and all that.
Yeah.
So I hope they went to Fort Walton and brought me Domo or Chipotle.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I would second both of those emotions right there. But I would say in Niceville, there's lots of places I would like, but the Thai Lotta out in Blue Water. I love Thai food. So I would hope it's Thai food.
In New York last week.
Oh man, Thai food is the best. So
2 weeks ago.
Whenever
that was.
Whenever it was you were there, it's been a blur.
It has been a blur. All right. Well, I get the last one.
All right.
What's your favorite way to end Boggy Talk?
My favorite way to end Boggy Talk is usually stuttering and trying to figure out what am I trying to say and then being like, all right, that's it. Yeah. Favorite way to end Boggy Talk.
And you thinking you're ending and me saying some stupid comment.
And like I said. But hey, if you want any clarification or have more questions about what we shared, feel free to reach out. You can send us a message.
You should have said never. Because it's such a joy to spend time with me and connect with the Boggy Talk Nation.
I just want this to go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
But I think probably just the way we end it. So why don't we do that?
Let's do it.
Hey, thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to being with you next. See, I stuttered again. We look forward to being with you next time. Again, stutter. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.